Achoo. Achoo. God damn it. Achoo. Kale staggered back, swiping irritably at his nose with the back of his grimy glove. The air in the crumbling Xylosian temple hung thick with iridescent dust motes kicked up by his intrusion, catching the weak beams of his headlamp like malevolent glitter. He'd barely nudged a drooping spore-heavy vine, and now his sinuses were staging a full-blown rebellion. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for another volley, when a low, resonant hum vibrated through the stone floor and up his boots. It wasn't machinery. It was organic. And close. He snapped his eyes open, hand instinctively dropping to the blaster holstered on his thigh. Standing not 5 meters away, partially obscured by a moss-covered archway, was a figure that definitely hadn't been there a second ago. Female, humanoid-ish, but utterly alien. She was tall, leanly muscled, her skin a canvas of shifting bioluminescent scales that pulsed with soft turquoise light. Intricate, darker markings flowed like living tattoos across her limbs and torso. A thick, prehensile tail, easily as long as her legs, swished lazily behind her, the tip twitching with apparent curiosity. Delicate, almost feathery tendrils sprouted near her temples, quivering slightly in the still air, but it was her eyes that held him, large, obsidian dark, and fixed on him with unnerving intensity. A low chuckle, more like a series of melodic clicks, escaped her. She took a step forward, the turquoise glow brightening, shifting towards a warmer violet around the edges. "You signal," she stated, her voice a strange, layered resonance that seemed to echo inside his skull. Not quite Terran standard, but close enough. Her pronunciation was clipped, precise. Kale blinked, still reeling from the sneeze attack and the sudden appearance. "Signal? I wasn't signaling anything. I was... achoo sneezing." He punctuated the denial with another involuntary nasal explosion. The alien tilted her head, the tendrils near her temples flared slightly, casting faint purple shadows on her high cheekbones. The violet light intensified, pulsing rhythmically. A strong signal, a burst of life force, an invitation. She took another step, moving with a fluid grace that was both predatory and captivating. Kale tightened his grip on his blaster. "Look, lady, I don't know what jungle planet you beamed down from, but sneezing isn't an invitation. It's involuntary respiratory ventilation." Her dark eyes narrowed slightly. The off the violet glow didn't diminish. "You expel energy." She mimicked the sneeze sound, a surprisingly accurate, explosive click hiss. "You announce readiness." Before Kale could process the sheer weirdness of that interpretation, she closed the distance between them with startling speed. One moment she was 3 meters away, the next her cool, scaled hand was clamped firmly on his chest, right over his pounding heart. He froze, trapped between alarm and a sudden, unwelcome jolt of awareness. Her touch wasn't harsh, but it was undeniably strong. Her scales felt smooth, cool, like polished river stones. The violet light washing over him seemed to thrum against his skin. Her face was close now, those huge dark eyes scanning his features. He could smell a faint, clean scent, something like ozone and night-blooming flowers. Her temple tendrils vibrated gently against his cheek, sending tiny sparks of static electricity across his skin. "You are disorganized," she murmured, her gaze flicking down to his dusty scavenger gear, then back to his eyes. The violet light softened slightly, edged with inquisitive turquoise again. "But potent." Her thumb brushed against the worn fabric of his jacket right over his sternum. This signaled tea is rare, authentic. Kale swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. His blaster felt very far away. "It's really not a signal," he insisted, trying to keep his voice steady despite the alien warrior goddess currently using his chest as a handrest. "It's allergies, dust, pollen, microscopic irritants." She leaned closer, her scent intensifying. The tendrils brushed his earlobe. "Details," she dismissed, the single word resonating with amusement and something else. "Possessiveness?" The intent is clear. Her tail coiled loosely around his leg, a firm but not constricting pressure. Panic warred with a confusing primal pull. This was insane. She thought his sneezing was a mating call? "No intent," he practically yelped. "Zero intent. Accidental sneeze." She just smiled, a slow curve of lips that revealed slightly pointed teeth. The violet light pulsed warmly. Denial is customary? Intriguing. Her grip on his chest tightened fractionally, pinning him against the crumbling temple wall. I accept your signal. Kale somehow managed to stumble back to the rust bucket, his battered freighter, with the alien woman trailing him like an overly curious bioluminescent shadow. He kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting her to vanish back into the jungle gloom, but she was relentlessly there, her tail swishing, her dark eyes taking in everything. Getting her up the retractable ramp was an exercise in silent, mutual awkwardness. She paused at the threshold, her tendrils flaring as she scanned the cramped, cluttered interior, the pilot's seat worn smooth, consoles jury-rigged with bypass wires, empty nutrient paste tubes littering the floor, the faint but persistent smell of recycled air and engine coolant. "This is your nest?" she asked, the turquoise glow flickering with what Kale interpreted as deep skepticism. "It's a ship," Kale grumbled, squeezing past her into the cockpit. "And it's not a nest. It's my transport. My home, sort of. Now look." He turned to face her, determined to set some boundaries. "You can't stay here. I appreciate you not dissecting me back there, but this isn't a hotel. I'm a scavenger. I move around. It's dangerous. You need to go back to wherever you came from." Lyra? As she'd introduced herself with a series of resonant clicks he approximated as Lyra merely tilted her head, her expression unreadable beneath the shifting light. She stepped fully inside, the ramp hissing shut behind her. The cramped space immediately felt smaller, charged with her presence. She ran a scaled hand over the cool metal of the bulkhead, her touch leaving faint glowing trails that faded after a second. "You travel alone? In this small shell?" "It gets me where I need to go," Kale said defensively. "And yes, alone. Usually," he gestured vaguely. "So you see, no room. Definitely no room for tall, glowy aliens with communication issues." Lyra ignored him, her attention caught by the flickering nav display. She reached out, her long fingers hovering inches from the screen. "Stars," she breathed, the violet edge returning to her glow. "Contained." "Yeah, well, it's a map," Kale sighed. "Helps me not fly into suns. Useful." He stepped between her and the console. "Seriously, Lyra, you need to leave. I don't know what your customs are, but where I come from, following someone home after they sneeze on you is considered weird and possibly alarming." She blinked slowly, her tendrils brushing his shoulder as he blocked her view. The contact sent another unwanted shiver down his spine. "Alarming?" she repeated, testing the word. The glow shifted to a curious yellow-green. "Your heart pulse quickened when I touched you. Your scent changed, not alarm, awareness." Kale flushed. "Da. Minute. Okay, maybe a little awareness. You're visually distracting. But that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean move in." He tried to sidestep her, aiming for the galley alcove. Lyra moved with him, a fluid shadow. "My previous nest was compromised," she stated simply, her tone devoid of self-pity. "Pursuers." "Pursuers?" Kale stopped short. "What kind of pursuers?" "My own kind," she said, the glow dimming slightly, turning a deeper, troubled blue. "A disagreement regarding hierarchy and territory." "Great," Kale muttered. "So, you're not just misinterpreting biological functions, you're also on the run from your own species. Fantastic. Just what my quiet, uncomplicated life needed." Lyra straightened, the blue deepening, shadows gathering in the hollows of her scaled cheeks. "I am Kithar. We do not flee without purpose. I require temporary sanctuary." Your signal suggested potential alliance. "It was a sneeze," Kale insisted, throwing his hands up in exasperation. "How many times do I have to say it? No alliance, no signal, just bad air." Lyra's tail tapped impatiently on the deck plating. "Your vocalizations are agitated, yet your core resonance remains receptive." She reached out again, aiming for his chest. Kale instinctively batted her hand away. "Don't do that! Don't touch the resonance!" Her hand froze mid-air. The glow around her flared bright white for a split second, then settled back into a pulsing violet, deeper than before. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Kale saw something genuinely dangerous flicker in their depths. "You refuse contact?" she asked, her voice losing its melodic quality, becoming flat, cold. Kale held his ground, though his own heart was hammering against his ribs. "Yes. No touching. Personal space. It's a human thing. Lyra studied him for a long moment, her gaze intense, analytical. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Then, slowly, she lowered her hand. The violet light softened, regaining its turquoise edges. Human customs are inefficient, she murmured. So much distance. She turned away from him then, examining a diagnostic panel on the wall, her fingers tracing the seams. But I will respect your space for now. She glanced back at him over her shoulder, a faint, challenging smirk playing on her lips. This small shell is secure? Kale let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Reasonably. Cloaking is decent. Shields are... Okay, why? Lyra's smirk widened. Good. The E-pursuers will not detect us easily while I adjust. Adjust? Kale had a sinking feeling adjustment involved him, whether he liked it or not, and judging by the determined glint in her obsidian eyes, he wasn't going to like it one bit. Life aboard the rust bucket became a chaotic ballet of avoidance and forced proximity. Lyra, true to her grudging word, maintained a physical distance Kale found both relieving and strangely disappointing. But distance didn't mean invisibility. She was everywhere. Her shifting bioluminescence painted the cramped cabin in a constant kaleidoscope of mood lighting, curious turquoise when she examined his salvage gear, frustrated red flickers when she failed to operate the nutrient paste dispenser. This food is inert, she'd declared, pushing the tube away with disdain, and a soft, pulsing violet whenever her gaze lingered on him a moment too long. Kale found himself unconsciously tracking her emotional state by her color palette. He also learned that her tail was practically a third limb, used for balance, emphasis, and occasionally passive-aggressive maneuvering. More than once he'd found his path subtly blocked by its scaled length, forcing him to awkwardly step over it while she pretended to be engrossed in studying a star chart. Communication remained a minefield. Lear's grasp of standard was functional but lacked nuance, leading to bizarre misunderstandings. Kale's attempts to learn the basics of her Cathar communication, the subtle shifts in glow, the meaning behind the vibrations of her tendrils, the flick of her tail, were met with Lyra's patient amusement, which somehow felt more condescending than helpful. Your resonance is flat, she'd observed one cycle, after he'd tried mimicking a low hum she seemed to use for contentment. Like dry rock. Kale scowled. Well, excuse me for not having built-in mood lighting and surround sound. Lyra's lips quirked. The turquoise light brightened. It can be learned with the right stimulus. Kale wisely chose not to ask what kind of stimulus she had in mind. The teasing was relentless, a constant undercurrent beneath their stilted conversations. She'd comment on his inefficient human habits, sleeping for extended periods, such vulnerability, his reliance on coffee, artificial energy, easily depleted, his occasional frustrated muttering at malfunctioning equipment. Your vocal stress patterns are unproductive. He'd retaliate by critiquing her habit of perching on the back of the co-pilot chair like some kind of gothic gargoyle, or her tendency to sample his salvage tech components with inquisitive licks. Hey, don't lick the capacitor. That's worth credits. She'd retract her tongue, leaving a faint glowing residue. Its energy signature was bland. Despite the constant friction, an uneasy truce settled between them. Kale worked on sorting his latest haul from the Xylosian ruins, trying to ignore the tall glowing alien meticulously cleaning her wickedly sharp wrist blades in the galley alcove. Lyra, in turn, seemed content to observe him, her intense gaze occasionally making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. One evening cycle, Kale was hunched over a flickering console, trying to decrypt coordinates from a salvage data chip. Frustration gnawed at him. He slammed his fist lightly on the panel. Come on, you piece of junk! A low, resonant hum filled the cabin. Lyra had moved silently behind him. He could feel the warmth radiating from her, smell that faint ozone and flower scent. The data stream is corrupted, she stated, her voice close to his ear. Her tendrils vibrated gently, almost touching his temple. The encryption key requires a harmonic sequence. Kale stiffé. Ned, hyper-aware of her proximity. Yeah, I figured that much out. Finding the sequence is the problem. Lyra leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his. He could see the intricate patterns of her scales shifting in the dim light. The Cathar use resonance keys, based on biosignatures. She reached past him, her cool fingers hovering over the console. Her own bioluminescence pulsed, casting violet shadows across the controls. Allow me. Before Kale could object, her fingers danced across the interface, not typing but seeming to coax sounds, faint tonal pulses from the machine. The corrupted data stream on the screen flickered, stabilized, then resolved into clean lines of code. Coordinates. Clear as day. Kale stared, dumbfounded. How? How did you do that? Lyra withdrew her hand, the violet glow softening. Energy recognizes energy. Your machines respond to the right frequencies. She looked at him, her dark eyes holding a mixture of pride and challenge. Some signals are universal, Kale. His name on her resonant lips sent another unwanted jolt through him. He looked from the now decrypted coordinates to her luminous face. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Her tail rested lightly against his leg. Not coiled, not possessed. I've just... There, a connection, he cleared his throat. Right, thanks, that's useful. Lyra's lips curved into that slow, knowing smile. I have many useful skills. The way she said it, the way the violet light pulsed around her, made it clear she wasn't just talking about decrypting data chips. The close proximity, the shared success, the undeniable competence radiating from her, it chipped away at his defenses. He was starting to see past the weirdness, past the sneeze misunderstanding. He was starting to see her, and that, Kale admitted grimly to himself, was far more dangerous than any allergy. The decrypted coordinates pointed to a derelict refinery station tucked away in a notoriously unstable asteroid field known as the Serpent's Coil. High risk, high reward. Exactly Kale's kind of salvage op. Lyra had watched his preparations with keen interest, her turquoise glow indicating curiosity, occasionally sharpening to yellow when he handled weaponry. You anticipate conflict? She asked, observing him check the charge on his blaster. Always, Kale replied grimly, holstering the weapon. Refineries probably pick clean but could be squatters, or worse, corporate patrols, claiming salvage rights they don't have. And said at her. She stood easily, balanced and alert, her own wrist blades gleaming softly. You any good in a fight? Besides pinning unsuspecting sneezers to walls. A flash of red flickered through her glow. I survived the Cathar trials. I hunted apex predators on worlds that would melt your shell. Do not mistake my curiosity for incompetence, Kale. Her tone was sharp, the predator beneath the surface momentarily revealed. Kale held up his hands in mock surrender. Okay, point taken, just checking. But her intensity sparked something else, a grudging respect, and a definite flicker of heat. Seeing her warrior aspect fully emerge was potent? He turned back to the nav computer, plotting their approach vector through the churning debris field. All right, the coil is tricky. Lots of gravitational eddies, sensor ghosts. Stay strapped in. Lyra settled into the co-pilot seat, securing the harness with an efficiency that suggested familiarity with high-G maneuvers. Her glow settled into a calm, watchful blue, her tendrils twitching slightly as she scanned the external monitors, displaying the approaching chaos of rock and ice. As they entered the outer edge of the field, the rust bucket began to buck and shudder. Asteroids so. Me small as pebbles, others large as shuttles, tumbled past the viewport. Kale's hands flew across the controls, piloting purely on instinct and experience, dodging, weaving, compensating for sudden gravitational shifts. Sensor ghosts multiplying, Lyra reported, her voice calm despite the violent maneuvers. 3 contacts, closing fast, not debris. Kale swore under his breath. Scavengers probably think we're claim jumping. They match standard Zarian pirate configurations, Lyra added, her eyes narrowed on the tactical display. Lightly armed but maneuverable. Great, space jackals. Kale pushed the engines harder, threading the needle between 2 massive spinning chunks of rock. Alarms blared as proximity warnings screamed. Can you get a weapons lock? Lyra's fingers flew across the secondary console, her glow intensifying to a focused orange. Targeting systems, sluggish, atmospheric interference from refinery venting residual gases. Red warning lights flashed across the dash. An energy bolt sizzled past their port side, close enough to make the ship rattle. Guess they're not feeling chatty, Kale muttered, banking hard to starboard. Another shot impacted their rear shields, making the lights flicker. Shields! At Tie percent, Lyra called out. They're flanking us. Kale gritted his teeth. He couldn't outrun them and fight the asteroid field simultaneously. He needed an edge. He glanced at Lyra. Her face was set, determined, her entire being focused on the tactical situation. The calm blue glow was gone, replaced by a fierce, burning crimson. Can you overload their sensors? Kale asked, dodging another blast. Create a massive ghost signal. Lyra didn't look away from her console. Possible. It would require channeling a significant energy surge through the main deflectors. Risky, could disable our own systems temporarily. Do it, Kale snapped, executing a tight barrel roll to avoid a collision. Lear's hands moved in a blur, the ship's internal lighting flickered violently. A deep hum resonated through the deck plating, growing in intensity. Kale felt the hairs on his arms rise. Outside, a blinding flash erupted from the rust bucket's deflector array. The pursuing pirate ships scattered, their targeting locks clearly scrambled. Direct hit on their sensor arrays. Lyra reported, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. They are blind. Nice work, Kale grinned, relief washing over him. Now let's lose them in the refinery structure. He guided the rust bucket towards the looming skeletal framework of the derelict station, vanishing into its metallic canyons. They navigated the rusting corridors of the station's exterior, the pirate ships hopefully lost in the sensor chaos they'd created. Silence fell in the cockpit, broken only by the hum of the life support and the distant pinging of micrometeoroids against the hull. Kale let out a long breath, his knuckles white on the controls. Lyra unstrapped herself, her glow softening back to a mix of blue and violet. She turned in her seat, looking at him. The adrenaline still sang in his veins. Her eyes seemed darker, deeper in the dim light. That was effective, she said, her voice low. You fly well under pressure. You fry sensors well under pressure, Kale countered, meeting her gaze. The air thickened again, the shared danger forging a new kind of intimacy. He noticed a faint, shimmering residue on the console where her hands had worked. He reached out, touching it tentatively. It felt cool, slightly viscous, and pulsed with a faint light before fading. What is this? Lyra watched his fingers, her expression unreadable. Biosignature marking, claiming resonance, standard Cathar practice after shared exerti. On, Kyle snatched his hand back as if burned. Claiming resonance? Shared exertion? She'd marked his console? You marked my ship? Lyra tilted her head. A temporary ward. Against hostile energies. She didn't sound entirely convincing. That slow, challenging smirk returned. Unless you object? Object. Part of him wanted to scrub the console clean, reassert his independence, but another, stronger part was fascinated, flattered, and dangerously aroused by the possessive implication. He just stared at her, caught in the pull of her violet gaze, the echo of battle fading into a different kind of tension altogether. They found a relatively secure docking bay deep within the refinery's decaying superstructure. Power was offline, emergency lights casting long, eerie shadows across rust-streaked bulkheads. The air tasted stale, metallic. Kale powered down the rust bucket's main systems, leaving only essential life support active. Silence descended, amplifying the subtle creaks and groans of the dying station around them. He ran a diagnostic check. Shields took a beating, down to 40%. That sensor burst drained the auxiliary power cells. We'll need time to recharge before we can even think about leaving the coil, let alone dealing with those pirates if they regroup. Lyra nodded, her gaze sweeping the dark corners of the bay. Her glow was a soft, watchful cyan. This place feels empty. Old sorrows linger. Kale shivered, though the cabin wasn't cold. Yeah, well, refinery work is soul-crushing even when the station isn't falling apart. He pushed himself out of the pilot seat, stretching cramped muscles. The adrenaline ebb left him feeling drained, wired. He glanced at Lyra. She was still perched in the co-pilot's seat, but her posture seemed less guarded, almost weary. He noticed a dark, viscous patch staining the scales on her left shoulder, near the joint. You're hurt. Lyra followed his gaze, touching the spot almost absently. Minor damage. A ricochet during the sensor overload. Kinetic energy feedback. Minor. Kale stepped closer, frowning. That looks like it needs attention. He reached for the med kit stowed under the console. Lyra watched him, her expression unreadable, but she didn't object. He knelt beside her seat, opening the kit. The close proximity felt different now, charged not just with awareness, but with the residue of shared danger, shared survival. He pulled out a dermal regenerator and antiseptic wipes. Okay, let me see. Ra hesitated for only a second before angling her shoulder towards him. Kale gently pushed aside the edge of her simple tunic. The wound was deeper than it looked, a jagged tear in the scaled flesh oozing a dark sapphire blue fluid. Her blood. It didn't look like bleeding, more like weeping light. Kale's breath hitched. He carefully cleaned the area, his fingers brushing against the cool, smooth scales surrounding the injury. They felt like interlocking gems beneath his touch. Lyra remained perfectly still, her gaze fixed on his face. Her glow softened further, turning a warm, muted lavender. He could feel the faint vibration of her tendrils near his cheek. He applied the dermal regenerator. The device hummed softly, sealing the wound with synthesized skin. Lyra inhaled sharply, a soft hiss as the regenerator worked. Her free hand came up, resting lightly on his forearm. Her touch was cool, firm, sending an electric jolt straight up his arm. He looked up, meeting her dark eyes. They were inches apart. The air felt thick, vibrating with unspoken energy. The scent of ozone and night flowers intensified. Her tendrils brushed his temple, a feather-light caress that made his pulse hammer. "You show care," she murmured, her voice a low thrum that resonated deep in his chest. "It's just a scratch," Kale mumbled, his voice rough. He finished with the regenerator, his hand lingering near her shoulder. Her skin seemed to pulse with faint warmth beneath his fingertips, despite its coolness. "It required attention," she insisted softly. Her eyes searched his face, pupils dilating slightly. "Your resonance shifts when you are near me now, less resistance." Kale couldn't deny it. The barriers he'd so carefully maintained were crumbling. The sarcasm, the guardedness, they felt flimsy, useless against the pull he felt towards her. The sheer alienness of her, which had initially been intimidating, now felt fascinating, intoxicating. Her hand tightened slightly on his forearm. Her tail, which had been still, now curled gently around his ankle. Not trapping him, just connecting. He leaned closer, drawn by an irresistible force. Her lavender glow illuminated the subtle contours of her face, the sharp line of her jaw, the curve of her lips. He could see the intricate, shifting patterns within her scales, a mesmerizing, living tapestry. "Lyra," he breathed her name, the sound raw in the quiet cabin. She tilted her head, closing the final distance between them. Her lips met his. They were cool, smooth, softer than he'd expected. It wasn't a demanding kiss, but exploratory, tentative. A spark ignited, immediate and intense. Kale's hand slid from her shoulder to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in the short silky hair at her nape. He pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. Lyra responded instantly, her mouth opening under his, her own hand sliding up his chest, fingers splaying over his racing heart. Her tendrils vibrated intensely against his cheek, sending waves of pleasure through him. The kiss wasn't human. There was a faint taste of ozone, a subtle energy exchange that felt like touching a low-voltage current. It was alien, thrilling, terrifyingly intimate. He felt her tail tighten around his ankle, pulling him closer still. The kiss broke, leaving them both breathless, staring at each other in the dim lavender light. Lyra's eyes were dark pools, reflecting the glow. A slow smile touched her lips. "Your signal," she whispered, her voice husky, resonant. "It is?" Much clearer now. Kale didn't argue this time. He simply leaned in and kissed her again, surrendering to the potent, chaotic energy that arced between them. The kiss deepened, ignited by the residual adrenaline and the undeniable pull that had simmered between them since the Xylossian ruins. Kale's hands explored the curve of her back, tracing the interlocking pattern of her scales through the thin fabric of her tunic. Cool, smooth, yet radiating an internal warmth that belied their reptilian feel. Lyra shifted in the seat, turning more fully towards him, her body pressing against his. Her hands slid under his jacket, fingers tracing the muscles of his back, her touch surprisingly strong. Possessive. He gasped as her tendrils deliberately brushed against the sensitive skin behind his ear, sending shivers down his spine. The sensation was overwhelming, alien, intensely pleasurable. Her glow intensified, shifting from lavender to a deep pulsing violet that filled the small cockpit, reflecting in Kale's eyes. It wasn't just light, it felt like tangible energy washing over him, heightening every sensation. He fumbled with the fastenings of her tunic, needing to feel more of her. Lyra anticipated his need, shrugging out of the garment with fluid grace. Her upper body was revealed, leanly muscled, the intricate, shifting markings flowing over smooth planes of scaled skin. Her breasts were small, high, tipped with dark areolas that tightened under his gaze. The bioluminescence seemed brightest there, pulsing in rhythm with her breathing. Kale reached out, his calloused fingers tracing the edge of a swirling marking on her shoulder, marveling at the texture, the coolness, the faint thrum of energy beneath the surface. Lyra watched his touch, her obsidian eyes heavy-lidded. "Your heat," she murmured, leaning into his hand. "It feels vital." She countered his exploration with her own, her cool fingers mapping the contours of his chest through his shirt, lingering over his heartbeat. Her touch was deliberate, analytical yet sensual. He tugged his own shirt off over his head, tossing it aside. The contrast between her cool skin and his own warmth was stark, electrifying. Lyra spread her hands flat against his bare chest, her violet glow seeming to sink into his skin, warming at the contact points. A low hum vibrated from her, resonating through his bones. It wasn't just sound. It felt like a physical connection, a tuning fork struck against his soul. He groaned, arching into her touch. This was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It wasn't just physical. It felt deeper, more fundamental. Lyra lowered her head, her lips brushing the skin over his collarbone. Her tongue flicked out, asking him. A jolt went through Kale. "Your salt, your life chemistry, fascinating," she whispered against his skin before capturing his mouth in another searing kiss. Her tail uncoiled from his ankle, sliding up his leg, the tip brushing intimately against his thigh, making him gasp into her mouth. He pulled her closer, half lifting her from the seat, needing to bridge the remaining distance. Her legs wrapped around his waist, scaled skin surprisingly smooth against his rougher trousers. They clung together in the dim light, a tangle of warm human flesh and cool, glowing alien scales. Kale fumbled with the fastening of his pants, his need urgent, overwhelming. Lyra watched his clumsy efforts with an amused glint in her eyes, her violet glow pulsing faster. She reached down, her dexterous fingers making quick work of the clasp. Kale sucked in a breath as her cool hand deliberately brushed against his hardening length. "Eager," she observed, her voice a low purr. "Your energy spikes." He captured her hand, pressing it more firmly against him. "You have no idea," he rasped. He lowered her gently until her feet touched the deck plating, then backed her against the cool metal of the bulkhead. The violet light cast their shadows, large and dancing against the opposite wall. He explored her body more freely now, learning the landscape of her, the slight ridges along her spine, the sensitive junction where her tail met her lower back, the surprisingly soft skin on the inside of her thighs. Everywhere he touched, her glow seemed to respond, brightening, swirling, shifting hues. Lyra arched against him, her hands gripping his shoulders, her pointed nails pressing slightly into his skin, not painfully, but anchoring him. Her breathing grew ragged, matching his own. The low hum intensified, vibrating through both of them. It felt like bonding, like frequencies aligning. He lowered his head, kissing the valley between her breasts, tasting the faint ozone scent of her skin. She threw her head back, exposing the long line of her throat, the tendrils flaring wide, glowing intensely. "Kale," she breathed, the sound tight with pleasure. He met her gaze, saw the raw need mirroring his own. The guarded scavenger and the exiled alien warrior stripped bare, literally and figuratively, in the dim light of a dying space station. There was no room for sarcasm now, no space for misunderstandings. Only this raw, consuming connection. He lifted her slightly, positioning her egg against the bulkhead. Her legs wrapped around his waist again, her cool scales a shocking, exquisite contrast to his heat. He entered her slowly, carefully. She was tight, warm, her inner muscles clenching around him. It felt different, not just physically but energetically. As he slid deeper, her bioluminescence flared nova bright, washing the cockpit in intense violet light before settling back into a deep rhythmic pulse that matched the thrust of his hips. A gasp escaped her, a mixture of pain and pleasure, her tendrils vibrating wildly against his neck and shoulders. He paused, looking down at her face, searching her eyes. "Okay?" he murmured, his voice thick. Lyra's eyes fluttered open. They were dark, unfocused, lost in sensation. A faint tremor ran through her body. "Yes," she breathed, her voice strained. "The resonance, it builds." She arched her hips, urging him deeper. He began to move, setting a slow, deliberate rhythm. The friction was incredible, her alien anatomy conforming to his in ways that felt both strange and perfectly right. Her skin felt cool against his heated flesh, yet where they were joined, an intense heat built between them. The low, resonant hum emanating from her deepened, sinking into his bones. Vibrating through every nerve ending. It wasn't just sound, it was a physical force, pulling them together, syncing their bodies, their breathing, their heartbeats. Kale felt caught in its current, losing himself in the sensation. He watched her face, saw the way her markings shifted and flowed with her mounting pleasure, the way the violet light concentrated around her temples and pulsed down her limbs. Her tendrils brushed against his skin, seemingly of their own accord, tracing patterns, sending sparks of pure sensation wherever they touched. He experimented with the angle, the depth, learning her body, eliciting low, guttural moans that vibrated against his chest. She met his thrusts eagerly, her hands gripping his hips, guiding him, matching his rhythm with surprising strength. There was no shyness in her, no hesitation. She was fully present, raw, demanding. Her dominant nature surfaced even in intimacy, yet it wasn't overpowering. It was elemental, primal. She nipped at his shoulder, her pointed teeth grazing his skin, sending a fresh wave of heat through him. He groaned, burying his face in the curve of her neck, inhaling her unique scent. The coolness of her scales, the heat of their joining, the vibrating resonance, the shifting light. It was a sensory overload, pushing him towards the edge. "Kale," she gasped, her body tensing, her glow flaring brightly again. He felt the deep, rhythmic contractions begin within her, pulling him deeper, milking him. The resonance humming through them reached a fever pitch, a tangible wave of energy that seemed to bind them together. Her climax washed over her, sharp and intense, her back arching off the bulkhead, a strangled cry escaping her lips. The wave hit Kale a moment later, triggered by her release, by the overwhelming intimacy of the resonance. He cried out, spilling himself into her heat, his body shuddering, every nerve alight. The violet light pulsed violently, then slowly, gradually softened, fading into a warm, gentle lavender glow that enveloped them both. They sagged against each other, slick with sweat and exertion, Kale's forehead resting against hers. Her scales felt less cool now, warmed by their joining. Her breathing was ragged, matching his. Her tendrils lay limply against his shoulders, the intense vibrations stilled. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart against his chest, slightly faster than his own. He slid out of her gently, careful not to break the fragile intimacy of the moment. Lyra slumped against the bulkhead, her eyes closed, the soft lavender light pulsing faintly across her skin. Kale pulled his discarded shirt towards him, gently wiping the sheen of sweat from her face and shoulders. She opened her eyes, looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen before, softer, more vulnerable, stripped of her usual predatory confidence. "The resonance settled," she murmured, her voice husky. "Bonded." Kale's own heart clenched. Bonded. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected the depth of feeling, the sheer connection forged in the heat of their encounter. It went beyond physical satisfaction. It felt significant. He reached out, tracing the intricate marking on her cheekbone with one finger. Her skin was incredibly smooth here. She leaned into his touch, a soft sigh escaping her lip. The sneeze, the chaotic arrival, the bickering, the shared danger, it had all led to this moment of quiet, raw connection in the heart of a dead space station. He didn't know what it meant for the future, but right now, wrapped in the soft lavender glow of her aftermath, it felt undeniably real. He leaned down and kissed her softly, a gesture of tenderness that surprised even himself. Lyra's lips curved into a genuine, A gentle smile, the lavender light pulsed warmly, bathing them both in its soft glow. The lavender glow faded slowly, leaving them in the dim emergency lighting of the cockpit, leaning against each other, wrapped in a fragile quiet. Kale felt drained, yet strangely centered. Lyra rested her head against his shoulder, her usual vibrant energy replaced by a soft stillness. Her scales felt smooth and cool against his bare skin, a comforting contrast. He gently tucked a stray strand of silky dark hair behind her pointed ear. She stirred, lifting her head to look at him. Her obsidian eyes seemed softer, the usual intensity banked. That was... Kale started, then stopped, unsure how to articulate the depth of the experience. Unexpected. Lyra tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. The turquoise light began to return, soft and questioning. The resonance bond is never fully predictable. It amplifies existing potential. Potential? Kale asked, raising an eyebrow. So, you're saying if I hadn't been receptive, the energy would not have flowed? She finished simply. There would have been friction, but no joining, no settling. She reached out, tracing the line of his jaw with a cool finger. Your signal was chaotic, Kay. AL, accidental, as you insisted. A hint of teasing entered her voice. But the underlying frequency, it was compatible, curious, lonely. Kale flinched slightly at the last word, his defenses instinctively wanting to rise. But looking into her honest, searching gaze, he couldn't deny it. He was lonely. His life as a solitary scavenger, drifting from one wreck to the next, was free but isolating. Lyra seemed to sense his internal struggle, her touch gentled. Among my people, such a bond, once formed, is significant. It implies commitment, protection. Kyle's gut tightened. Commitment, protection. Those were words he actively avoided. Lyra, about that, the sneeze really was just a sneeze. I didn't know what I was signaling. I didn't know about resonance bonds. I know, she said softly, her glow remaining a steady, gentle turquoise. I understand that now. The initial contact was based on my cultural interpretation, but what happened between us here, that was not culture. That was choice. Yours, mine. She paused, her gaze unwavering. The bond is real, regardless of its origin. Do you feel it? Kale couldn't lie. He did feel it. A strange sense of connection, deeper than lust, more profound than the camaraderie of shared anger. It felt like a fine, invisible thread humming between them. Yeah, he admitted quietly. Yeah, I feel it. Lyra nodded, a soft satisfaction in her expression. Good. She pushed herself away from the bulkhead, gathering her discarded tunic. Kale watched her dress, the easy grace returning to her movements. The vulnerability of the aftermath was receding, replaced by her usual quiet confidence, but something had irrevocably shifted between them. She belonged here, now, in his ship, in his life. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right. So, he said, pulling on his own shirt, the mundane action feeling strangely grounding. What happens now? Still got pirates potentially lurking outside, and we're low on power. Lyra finished fastening her tunic, then checked the charge on her wrist blades. Her movements economical and precise. The warrior was back, but her glance towards him held a new warmth. Now we recharge, we prepare, and if the Zarians return, we demonstrate the strength of a bonded pair. A shiver went down Kale's spine, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was anticipation. A bonded pair. He looked around the cramped, messy cockpit of the rust bucket. It didn't feel quite so empty anymore. He met Lyra's gaze across the small space. A silent understanding passed between them. They were in this together now, whatever this was. Okay, Kale said, a slow grin spreading across his face. Let's show them what happens when they mess with sneeze-induced alliances. Lyra's lips curved in an answering smirk, her eyes gleaming with challenge and something that looked remarkably like affection. The turquoise light around her pulsed, bright and clear. They worked together with a newfound synergy, a silent understanding flowing between them. Kale focused on rerouting power, coaxing the damaged auxiliary cells to slowly regain charge from the ship's main reactor. Lyra, using senses Kale couldn't comprehend, monitored the exterior of the refinery station. She'd stand near the main viewport, eyes closed, tendrils quivering faintly, her glow shifting through subtle shades of blue and green. 3 Zarian signatures remain, she reported after a long period of concentration, holding position beyond the main debris field. Waiting. Smart, Kale muttered, checking the shield emitters. They know we're low on power, probably hoping we'll make a run for it. They are predictable, Lyra commented, opening her eyes. They held a predatory gleam. Their tactics rely on overwhelming force or attrition. They lack finesse. Kale had to agree the pirates had been more nuisance than genuine threat, relying on numbers and aggression. But with the rust buckets still vulnerable, they couldn't afford mistakes. He managed to bring the shields back up to 60% and partially recharge the weapon's capacitors. Not ideal, but better than nothing. Okay, power levels are stable if not great, Kale announced. We can try to slip out the way we came, use the refinery structure for cover again. Lyra shook her head, moving towards the nav conduit. Her glow shifted to a thoughtful violet. There is a better way. The refinery vented gases earlier. Residual thermal signatures remain concentrated in the primary exhaust conduit. She pointed towards a schematic displayed on Kale's screen. It leads directly out of the main station structure, bypassing the densest part of the debris field where they are likely watching. Kale studied the schematic. An exhaust conduit? That thing's probably ancient, unstable, could be structural collapses, residual heat pockets. The path is clear, Lyra stated confidently. I can sense the energy flows. It is open. Kale looked at her, at the timid certainty in her eyes. He trusted his ship, his piloting skills, but her Cathar senses added a whole new dimension. This sensing ability was unnerving but undeniably useful. You're sure? The risk is lower than engaging the Zarians directly, or navigating the main field with compromised shields, she reasoned. Kale took a deep breath. Okay, through the vents it is. Plot the course. Lyra's fingers danced over the console, inputting coordinates with a speed and precision that still amazed him. The rust bucket's engines hummed to life, the sound reassuringly familiar. Kale took the controls, easing the ship out of the docking bay and into the dark, narrow service channels of the station. Lyra navigated, calling out adjustments, her voice calm and steady, her glow a focused blue. Left conduit narrowing ahead. Compensate thrust port side. Thermal pocket detected. Minimal radiation. Maintain course. Kale flew on her guidance, trusting her senses implicitly now. They moved through the guts of the dead station, the ship scraping occasionally against unseen obstacles, the darkness absolute outside the cockpit lights. It was tense, claustrophobic work. Finally, they reached the main exhaust conduit. It was huge, cavernous, BBD with reinforcing struts coated in decades of industrial grime. Faint thermal signatures ghosted the walls. Full thrust once we clear the main aperture, Lyra instructed. The residual heat will mask our energy signature for a crucial few seconds. Kale nodded, gripping the controls. On your mark! They shot into the conduit. Kale pushed the engines, the rust bucket accelerating rapidly down the immense pipe. Light appeared ahead, the star field outside. Now, Lyra commanded. Kyle slammed the throttle forward. The ship surged out of the exhaust port and into open space, momentarily enveloped in a plume of dissipating heat and gas. On the tactical display, Kyle saw the 3 Zarian pirate signatures react, turning towards the unexpected energy flare. But they were too late. Kale was already banking hard, diving back towards the relative cover of the asteroid field, but on a trajectory clear of the main debris cluster. They're pursuing, Lyra warned. Weapons charging. Let them come, Kale said, a grim smile on his face. He looked at Lyra, saw the anticipation in her eyes, the crimson warrior light beginning to pulse around her. They weren't just running now, they were fighting back. Together, he activated the rear shield. Boosters, diverting remaining power. Target their lead ship, Lyra. Give them something to remember us by. Lyra's hands flew over the weapons console, her crimson glow flaring. Target locked, firing. Energy lanced out from the rust bucket, striking the lead pirate ship square on its engine housing. The vessel flared brightly, then veered off course, trailing smoke and debris. The other 2 ships hesitated, their pursuit faltering. Kale didn't wait. He pushed the rust bucket into the swirling dust and rock of the serpent's coil, leaving the refinery and the stunned pirates behind. They emerged from the serpent's coil, battered but intact, the disabled Zarian ship a fading sensor contact behind them. Kale plotted a course for the nearest neutral way station, a place where they could properly repair the rust bucket and replenish supplies without attracting unwanted attention. Silence settled in the cockpit again, but this time it was comfortable, companionable. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her glow a soft, contented turquoise, her gaze fixed on the swirling nebulae painted across the viewport. Kale watched the stars drift by, the tension slowly bleeding out of him. He felt exhausted, but beneath the fatigue was a deep sense of satisfaction and something else, peace. He glanced over at Lyra. The memory of their intimacy, the raw connection forged in the refinery was a tangible presence between them, the accidental signal, the cultural misunderstanding. It all seemed irrelevant now, overshadowed by the reality of their bond. So, Kale began, breaking the silence gently. Kethar warrior, resonance bonding expert. Any other hidden talents I should know about? Lyra turned her head, a slow smile spreading across her face. The turquoise light brightened, edges shimmering with amusement. My culinary preferences are specific, she offered teasingly. And I have been known to rearrange furniture to optimize energy flow. Kale chuckled. Furniture? Good luck with that in here. He gestured around the cramped utilitarian cabin. Not much to rearrange. Perhaps not, Lyra conceded, her gaze softening as she looked at him. But the energy flow between us, that feels optimal. Her honesty, stripped of subtext or Cathar cultural filters, hit him squarely in the chest. He reached across the space separating their seats, extending his hand. Lyra hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing her cool, scaled hand in his. Her fingers interlaced with his, a perfect fit despite the difference in species. Her skin was smooth, the scales barely noticeable except for the faint coolness. Her touch sent a quiet warmth spreading through him. They sat like that for a long while, simply holding hands, watching the universe unfold outside the viewport. The hum of the ship's engines was a steady, reassuring sound. Kale thought about the future. It was uncertain, likely dangerous. Lyra still had pursuers. His life as a scavenger was inherently unstable, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't facing it alone. He had a partner. An alien partner who thought his sneezing was foreplay, who could disable pirate ships with resonant energy bursts and whose touch made his soul hum. It was chaotic, unexpected, and utterly terrifying. And he wouldn't trade it. Lyra, he said softly, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. She looked at him, her dark eyes full of warmth and unspoken questions. About your pursuers, we'll deal with them, together. Her grip tightened on his hand. The turquoise glow deepened, infused with a fierce, protective violet. I know, she murmured, her voice resonating with conviction. A bonded pair is formidable. Kale squeezed her hand back, a sense of belonging settling over him, stronger than any fear. The rust bucket sped through the starfield, no longer just a solitary vessel, carrying a lonely scavenger, but a shared home, carrying two disparate souls bound by accidental signals and deliberate connection, heading towards an unknown future, together. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder again, her soft glow warming his skin, a silent promise in the vast, cold expanse of space. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but maybe, just maybe, it was the one he needed.